In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to convert a real number to a string. Before I begin, I'm just going to make the assumption that you know how to use relations. So I'm not going to get into too much detail on how to do that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So relations are located in the Tools tab right here, but I put it in my quick access, so I'll be selecting it from there. And I'm going to expand local parameters so I can see my parameters also. So I don't have any relations and I don't have any parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a parameter called real, and I'm going to set that equal to our test number 123.005. How about that? Hit the checkbox. Now when you create a parameter in your relations, there's no parameter called real, but if you set it equal to something, it will create it automatically for you. But it will create only real numbers and strings. Just this one is a real number. If I had a string up there, it would create a string. But if I hit the checkbox, you can see it creates the parameter called real. It's a real number. So I'm going to use some functions in Creo to go ahead and convert this real to a string. Now, Creo does convert numbers to strings, but only integers. So it'll just take an integer and turn that into a string. It'll just take your real number, round it out, and turn it into a string. So we want to see the decimal place followed by the fractional part. So we're going to use some functions to do that. So here they are. We're going to use string length to determine how long our string is. String length has one argument, and that is the string parameter, or you could just put the string just straight in there, just the string parameter string. And right now this example is that the parameter material is equal to steel right now. And if you say what's the string length of steel, it'll return 5. Extract takes pieces from your string. And it has 3 arguments. Extract has the first argument being what string you want me to take it from, followed by a comma, and then where do you want me to start, position, and then a comma, and then how many characters do you want me to read, and then we'll pull that from the string. And here's the function we're just talking about, ITOS, that converts an integer to a string. If you try to put a real number in, it just rounds it off. So this just converts a number into a string. So to show what ITOS does, I'm just going to type it in, ITOS, and it has one argument in parentheses, and it's going to be real. Now I'm going to need some temporary. I'm going to create a temporary, T-E-M-P, just call it temp. I'm going to create a string parameter called temp on the fly here. So I'll hit the checkbox, and you see it created temp. It's a string, but it rounded off like expected. It rounded that string off. So we don't want to round it off. We want to see all these characters with the decimal place. So what we can do though is we can move that decimal place. If we move it over 3, we can get all the characters into temp. To show how that's done, if I just multiply this by 1,000 and hit check mark, you see we have all the characters now. All the characters that we need are in our string. So all we have to do is pull pieces of the string out and put a dot where it needs to go, or a decimal place where it needs to go, and then put the rest of the string in. And that's what we're going to be doing. So instead of, now this would only work if I wanted to have 3 place decimals. Let's multiply them by 1,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that a little flexible. I'm going to create a parameter called decimals, and that's going to control how many decimal places we want. And we're going to use it right here. And it's going to be an integer, so I'm just going to go ahead and create it down here. I'll hit the plus, and I'm going to create a parameter called decimals. And it's going to be an integer. And I'm going to set it initially for 3. And then instead of the 1,000 here, I'm just going to say 10, and then a caret to the power of, and then I'm going to decimals. Just like that. So decimals is a parameter set at 3, so this is 10 to the 3rd. So I'll multiply it by 10 to the 3rd, which is going to move that over. And by the way, my personal preference is I capitalize all my parameters and my relations just so I know their parameters, and I keep dimensions and functions lowercase. That's just personal preference. There's no reason you don't have to capitalize if you don't want to. I just do it easier to read. So now that I have that set, I'm going to create another parameter, find out how long this string is. We're going to need that to find positions in the string to extract from. We're going to use it for that. So I'm going to create a parameter called string length, and it's going to be an integer also, so I need to add it down here. And I'm just going to call it SL for string length, and I'm going to make that an integer. Okay, check, evaluate that. Okay, so string length 0. And now I'm going to set string length up here. String length will equal the string. And by the way, instead of typing it all in, if you forget how the name of the function, just go to your function list right here and look it up here, and it should be here. So there is string length. I'll just double click on it if you forget what the name of that function is. So I want the string length of temp. Okay, that should set this to 6. And there it went, string length width to 6. So now that I have that set, I'm going to create, I'm going to create our real string now. This is going to be the string that we're going to use. Real underscore string. You can call it anything you want. I'm just calling it real string. And I'm going to set that equal to, and what I'm going to set that equal to is pieces of this temp string. So what I'm going to do is use that extract function. And extract from what? I'm going to extract from temp, comma. Where do I want to start? Well, I always want, in the first part of the string, I always want to start position 1, so that's easy. And on this particular one, I want to go 3 characters, so I'll just type in 3 and close parentheses and hit the check mark, and it should create a parameter called real string. And you can see real string was created, and it's 1, 2, 3, which is what I just told it to do. Now, I extracted the first 3 characters. Now I need a point there, so I'm going to add the point. So I'll just add. You can add to strings. I'm just going to add. If you're going to type in any words or even a decimal place or a dot, put it in quotation marks, so it's quote dot point. So that will add the dot. Let's just see that happen. Here it is down here, real string. It's 1, 2, 3. I'll hit the check mark, and now I'll have 1, 2, 3 dot. And now I'm going to add another piece. I'm going to use the same extract function from what temp, comma. Where do I want to start? In this particular one, I want to start in position 4. So I'm just going to type in 4, comma, and I want to read 3 characters. So 3. Hit the check mark box, and now I have this real number converted to a string. Now I have hard numbers in here. I have a 3 and a 4 and another 3. That works for this specific one, or anyone with this format. 3 places here, 3 places there. We want this to work for everything. So in order to do that, we're going to have to replace this 3 with something else. And I'm going to replace this. How many characters do I want to read? Well, it's going to be all the characters except for what's the decimals and decimals. So it's going to be the string length minus the decimal places. So let's go ahead and put that in there. SL minus decimals. Just like that. So that shouldn't change anything. So right now it's 123.005. I put the check mark. Didn't change. 123.0 didn't change. So this is correct. Now for this one, extract temp. But where do I want to extract from? Well, in this case it's 4. But for any string, I got to put some function in here. So it's going to be the string length SL minus decimals, and that'll put me where? That'll put me string length is 6 minus decimals is 3, but I want to go one more. That puts me on that 3 right there. I want to shift it one more for a start location. I want to start at the 0. So I'm just going to add 1 and then see if that works. Hit the checkbox. Looks like it worked fine. And instead of a 3, I'm just going to call 3 decimals. Just how many characters? Well, I'm going to read 3 characters, the number of decimal places. Just like that. That shouldn't change anything. Still the same number. So now I've converted real into real string. And that's how you do it, basically. Unfortunately, this doesn't cover all situations. What happens if you don't have a whole number here? Let's just try and get rid of not a whole number, but let's just try if we just have a fraction. What if I have a 0 here? What's going to happen when I do that? Hit the checkbox, you can see there's a problem. You can see the real string is now a dot. What happened here? Well, this is what happened. We moved that decimal place over 3 places, so I put it at right up to the 5 there. And when we converted it to a string, it just rounds this off. Well, 005 is the same as 05 is the same as 5. So we're losing our leading zeros. So we're going to need to do something for the special case when it's less than 1. So I'm going to use the a conditional statement called if. I'm going to say if real is less than 1, do whatever's here, else do this, and then end if. And I like putting spaces here so it makes everything easier to read. So I'm going to copy this and place it up here, paste it up here. So now I have, if it's less than 1, I know that the first two characters should be 0 point. So I don't need to extract anything. I know what this extract part here, I don't need any of this because I know it's 0 point. So I'm going to delete that. And now I have just a point by itself. I'm just going to go inside the parentheses, inside the quotes here, and put a 0. So it becomes a 0 point. Because I ignore the first part of the string. I'm ignoring everything on this side. Well, if I'm ignoring everything on the left, that means I could add 1 to it so that I could keep my leading zeros. So if I say real equals real plus 1. Oops, I actually hit cap lock. Oh, capitalized. Just like that. So I'm adding 1, so it doesn't matter because I'm not using this. I could add 1,000 if I wanted to. It doesn't matter because I'm not using this part of the string, the front part. Any part in front. If it's less than 1, I'm not using it, so I don't care what I could add anything. And that allows me to put a 1 there. Now real becomes 1.005. And that's going to be fine. 3 places, okay. So I added 1. It should do this. It's less than 1, so it should do this. Let's hit the checkbox. You can see our error went away. And we now have the real number, which changed to 1, but our real number was originally 0.005, and that's what we have, 0.005. So that will take care of that will take care of just about any string. Now there is some cases with negative numbers. Of course, we have to do something different for negative numbers, and later in the video I'll show you how to deal with negative numbers. But for now, this is just for real numbers. Now this will only work correctly if decimals is greater than 0. It's got to be greater than 0. Can't work with 0. Because if you put 0 in there, you might as well be just doing ITOS, just enter through the string. You know, if you don't want any decimal places, why are you going through this? So I'm not going to allow for a 0. I mean, I can do some relations that will make detect if there's 0 decimal places, but that's just too much trouble. If you want 0 decimal places, use integer to string. Another thing I want to bring to your attention: if you notice that in this real number that we created, this real parameter, it's a real number, but notice it only has 6 characters, 6 decimal places. And that's a limit. When you're in relations, that's a limit set in your config options. So real, if you need more accuracy than that, if you need to bring this out more decimal places, you can bring it out to 14 decimal places if you want. And I'll show you how to do that. Let's just select OK for there. And what you do is you go into File, go to Options, go Configuration Editor, and if you have all options up there, you should be able to find it. The fastest way to find it, just say DEC, decimals. And if you look here, it says parameter decimal places, and it sets the number of decimal places. So if I needed, say it's defaulting at 6, and I need 8, I can hit Add Change, close that, select OK. And I don't want to save that setting, so I'll just say no to that. And if I go back to my parameters, you now see it has 8 place decimals. So there's a way to control that. There's a restriction from Creo that set a number of places. I really don't understand why that is, but it does go only to 6, defaults to 6. If you need more, you can do it there. So let's test this thing and make sure it's going to work correctly. So let's just put some random numbers in there. And let's just change this back part. And hit check mark. So we can see that our real number, which is up here, 634, is being done here. Let's round this out. Let's try 2. Let's try 2 decimals and see what our string is going to be. Check, and you can see it's rounded. And if I want to just do 1 decimal place, check mark, and you can see it's now rounded out to 1 place. So that's how you use how you can convert a real number into a string, and this should work for any number. And now I'm going to show you how to use it, how to use this in your models. Some usage that I got out of this, like for instance, I have a spring that displays force when it's compressed. I calculate how much force is being created by how much the spring is being compressed when it's in a flexible assembly, or it's flexible in an assembly. It produces force, so I want to display that force to the user so that they know how much force is being created by that spring. So I use this to convert that to a string, so I could say, because I could add to the string anything I want. Like right now it just says real string is 0.6, but I could add pounds to that if I want. So let's say down here, I can add in quotes, LBS, close quotes, and hit the check mark, and then you see it converts it. It adds the LBS onto there. So that's some of the things you can do with it. I'm going to show you how I used them. I used them here in an O-ring to display how much stretch was happening, how much compression was happening. I give warnings if you're overstretching an O-ring. It'll give you, instead of giving you how much percentage it's stretched, it'll give you a warning that you stretched it too much. So there's all kinds of applications where you need to change real into a string, just so you can get it into a parameter. So now I'm going to just demo how that's used. I'm going to bring up some models and show how I use it. So here's one example of how I use that string function to convert that real to a string. And this O-ring, this is actually one O-ring. This one, it changes shapes. Radial compression, axial compression, or it's compressed axially inside control, up here outside control, and then it even changes into a triangle for this SAE port. So this O-ring, it's all the same O-ring, all the same number. It's all the template O-ring right here. Now I want to see how much this O-ring is stretched, or how much it's compressed. I'm going to go to my filters. I obviously don't have my features on. Let me turn the features on so I can see them. Okay, so here's my O-ring right here. This is this one. So I select it, and I have a info bar here. So if I just put my mouse over it, it highlights. And if I click on it, it turns red, so now I can read it. And let's see what this thing says. And it's letting me know that I'm overstretching this O-ring. So the stretch is 22.26%, and it's giving me a warning that it exceeds 6%. And right now it's saying it's uncompressed, this particular one. Now the same O-ring, template O-ring. So the template O-ring, this is a special one I did so that I had the SAE ports. If I open this O-ring up, I want to change the shape. This is the shape of this O-ring. I might do a video on this O-ring in the future if I get requests for it, but this O-ring will change to any shape based on a parameter that I've created. So I'm going to go to my parameters and find it. It's called type, I think. O-ring type, OR type. So I have a restricted value parameter in here, so it only selects certain ones. So you can see it's an axial C with an ID and axial compression, axial C with OD and axial compression, no deformation, a radial seal, so you have to tell what the inside and outside diameters are. And then there's an option to change it into a SAE port, and then stretch only. In other words, it doesn't change shape, cross-sectional shape, but it does stretch. It still stays round. So those are the options that I've set up for it. And if I want to change it to SAE port, for example, I would do that, and then regenerate. And now I have it shaped like a triangle as cross section. So that's all controlled by my parameter. Okay, back to a circle. Yeah, I might do a video on that in the future, but what I've done here is I put all the information right down here in this info sketch. And right now, by default, I got it saying no errors and it's uncompressed. It's not stretched, so if it doesn't stretch, it'll give you this. If you don't do anything with it, it just gives you this for a message. But let's go back to let's close this one. And then go back to these other O-rings. So I have another O-ring that's inside here. There it is, the template O-ring. So let's see what that one is doing. Info is right there. So let me zoom in and see what that one's doing. And it's not stretched. It says it doesn't even apply to here because in this particular case doesn't matter. Compression is 23%. So that's how I change real numbers. So the 23 point, that's 2 decimal places I got it set up for. So that's how I use it in this example. Like I said, I might do a video on this O-ring at some later date. If I get enough requests for it, I'll do it. But that's how I'm using real number to string. So I can use it in my messaging here. You might want to use it as a part number driver. You might want to drive a part number with that, like O-ring sizes. You might want to create a parameter called size, and it will have the cross-sectional and the inside diameter of the O-ring. Let's take a look at another model. Okay, so here's the spring that I'm using. I did a demo on this, on how to create this spring, and it has a sketch here. It's displaying force of the spring. Right now in its natural state, it's uncompressed, so I put that message in there. But if I compress this spring, its current dimension is, let me just take a look. It's a metric spring, 40 millimeters long. So if I compress this, I have a rate parameter, and it takes that rate parameter and uses that to calculate how much force is being created by the spring, and then it will display in my force message here. I've got some instructions. It's just a PowerPoint that I created for this, how to use this spring. You can see it in my video for the spring. Let's get rid of that just to keep it out of the way. Let's go to images and turn that thing off. I don't want that in there. So there's my spring. So I'm just going to compress it. It's 40. So let me create a new assembly. So I'll just do a new assembly. Okay. And then I'll assemble that spring. And I'm going to say yes. And then I'll make it like 30. Okay. And then I'll make this just default. And there we go. So now if I highlight this, I gotta set this tree filters, features. So let's take a look in here. And there's our force, and you can see it's 30 newtons, 30.00 newtons. So there's another example of how to use it. I'm just displaying the force of the spring, and if somebody would try to stretch this spring, from like 40 to 50, I would just give an error message saying, hey, you're stretching a compression spring, so don't do that. You put any message you want, but so you can see how handy converting a real number to a string comes in, how it comes in. So I'll do a quick demo on how to go ahead and set that up so that you can put some information in your model. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to close this out. And close this one. And here's our O-ring, the one we started with. It's just the revolve. This is not the one. This is not the special one. But what I want to do is I want to take some information for this. Like say, for instance, the inside diameter, and I want to display it. So right now, I'm going to see what those dimensions are. And the inside is 4.75, outside is 0.5, so it's a metric O-ring again. So I'm going to click on the 4.5 and just go to properties. And right now its name is D13. I'm just going to call it ID, lowercase, because it's a dimension. I'm going to do the same thing for cross-section. I'm just going to call this one cross-section CS. If I'm going to use stuff in my relations, I always give them a name. If I'm going to use a dimension in my relations, I'm going to give them a name. That way it's easy to follow. I don't have any confusion.
So now I want to put, I'm going to create that string that I create. Let's see what I got here. I forgot what I did. Let's, instead of putting a number in, let's go ahead and put that value. Let's put in, and actually if you just click on it, the ID. If you just click on it, it'll put it in there for you. So real is ID. And then if I hit the check mark, let's see what we get. And as you can see, real, the number is 4.75, and I have one decimal place, so real is 4.8. I need, let's go ahead on the inside, let's make that 2, and hit the check mark again. And now it's saying the real string is 4.75. So I want it to say 4.75 ID. So I'm going to add that to both places here in case, well, in case this thing gets smaller. It might get smaller than 1. Could. So let's make sure we account for everything. So let's add it here. So I'm going to add ID to this. So colon, and then I'm going to ID. Just like that. And then the same thing here. Plus ID and close quotes. Colon. These are quotes. Sorry. Inside the quotes ID in both places. Hit the checkbox. And now it displays 4.75 ID. You might want a space there if you want one. Just put a space right here. Just put a space in, just to get it cleaned up a little bit. So it's 4.75 ID. Now how can I use that? Well, I can put that in my own if I want. I'm just going to do a sketch. You can do a cosmetic sketch if you want. I'm just going to do a sketch on this plane and sketch. And I'm going to put a piece of text in. And I'm going to start in the center and go up. And instead of entering it manually, I'm going to use a parameter. I'm going to use real string. So I'm going to insert selected. There's real string, and I want that in the center and in the middle. So there it is. So now, if I change the inside diameter, let's make sure that works. Let's change the inside diameter to a 5.6. How about that? If I regenerate that, I get 5.6 ID. Okay, so that's how that's done. And now I'm going to show how to add more of the cross-section list. I mean, this is just extra credit, basically. Just doing a little bit extra here just to show how it's done. So right now I got real set the ID, and it gives me this. So what if I copy all this over again? Control C that, and then go down here, go to the end, and press enter a couple times to show separation. I don't really need to see my parameters anymore. Pull this down so I can see the whole thing. So real is ID, and I'm just repeating it now. I've already got real string set. Real string is set already when it gets to this point, so I don't care what. If I change real again, it doesn't change this one. So I'm going to change the real from that to the cross section here. So I'm just going to pick that cross section. So real equals cross section. And then instead of ID, I'm going to say cross section CS. And these guys. And I'm going to add this. Now, real string is already set here, so I'm going to have to, real string, instead of saying real string equal to this, I'm going to say real string equals real string again, so it doesn't lose what it had, plus that. Same thing down here. I'm going to copy and paste this, and real string is now, this allows it to keep it what its current value is, Control V. So it's just going to keep what its original value was and add this to it now with these new numbers, with new temp, with everything new. Theoretically, that should work. Let's see what we get. And there we have it. That's a little bit big, so let's change that size. I usually, when I'm doing this kind of stuff, I don't like putting hard numbers in for the size of the text. I like putting in a ratio. So let's go do that. So this is going to be the text height. So if I'm going to use it in relations, it's going to be text height, or I'll just call it HT, or THT, text height, THT. And then I'm going to make that a percentage of maybe the So if I go to relations, I'm going to make that a percentage. I'm going to do that first. I'm going to say THT. I'm just going to click on it. You could click on it or type it. And I'm going to say it's a ratio. It's a percentage of something. So it's going to be the ID times 0.1. See what size text that is published, right? I regenerate. That doesn't look right. It looks, I need to go a little bit smaller. One more time. Let's just do it at 0.5 then. 0.05. How about 0.05? That should do it. So that way, no matter what size you make the O-ring, the text will be proportional to the size. So I got the ID, the cross section. I want an X between these two, ID and 050. So let's go ahead and put that in there. So it's a real string here, real string here. And on this one, I just need to put it here. Right? So if I press a space, X space, and then do the same thing here, but here I don't have the 0, I don't have anything there, so I have to add it here. So I put in quotes, space, X space. And let's see how that works out. Where did I go from here? Oh, I forgot to put the plus here. Plus that. Okay. And regenerate. And now I have the X in there. So now I got the O-ring being displayed. You could put this thing on a layer if you want to, or you could use this as a parameter for your part number. That might be all you need for a part number. It's called O-ring. This is the size. So there's all the cases that I could think of where you could need it right off the bat. There's more. Of course, there's tons more places you could use something like this. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. I've got one little discrepancy in relations. It's a bug. I've already confirmed it's a bug, but it's so rare. It's just one particular number in the universe. One particular number doesn't want to round off exactly correctly. It's off by just a very, very small amount. All right, I'll show you what that number that screws up. It's the only one I've been able to find that doesn't quite work right. It's only one number. It's just I don't understand why this is, but there's one number that just will not work. It won't round correctly. I mean, it works, but it just doesn't round correctly. Let me delete all this stuff and expand my local parameters. And here it is. We don't need any of this stuff, so let's take that out. And here's the number that won't work correctly. It's 1.005. It's the only number I can't get to work. Any other number works. So if I hit this and hit the check, select OK. As you can see, it didn't round correctly. The real string did not round correctly. It only does it for this one specific number, and it's only off. If I add this, it then rounds off correctly. So it's getting stuck on that 5. It's rounding up. Anything over 5 rounds up in this specific number. Now watch. Now here's the same thing. I'm gonna hit the checkbox, and there it is, not rounding correctly. Let me get rid of this ID so that doesn't. Hit the check mark. So you can see 1.005 is rounding up to this. It's losing. It's not rounding up. Only if I put 1,000, anything larger than 0.005, and it works. It rounds up. But now this number, if it was 10.005, like that, it should get the same error. It's not rounding correctly. However, if I hit the check mark, now it's rounding correctly. See the rounding? It rounded that number correctly. Don't know why it's doing it, but that's the only number I found. If you find the reason why it's doing this, I'd be glad to know, because I spent too much time on this video already. I don't really want to dig into it. It only worked. I've only been able to find it on that one specific number. Even if I bring it out, let's get this to give me an error again. Let's go here, or even 0. And another weird thing, here's 0. 0 does not work. It won't round up correctly. And 1, if I put 1 there, does not round correctly. But if I put 2 there and hit the check mark, now it's rounding correctly. it's the two conditions, I should say two numbers, it's the 0 and the 1 that doesn't want to work. But as soon as I put a 2 there, or 3 or 4, it works. So if I put 3 there, I might be missing something, it might be really obvious, but I don't see it. Why would it do 3 differently than 1? If I put 1 back in there, it rounds it. Oops. Check. It rounds it incorrectly. If I put a 1 there, a 1 or a 0 there, it rounds it differently than if it's a 2, 3, 4, 5. If I put a 5 there, it's fine. It'll round it up, 5.01. It does all the correct rounding except for 0 and 1, and that's only with the 5, the 0, 0, 5. It doesn't have this problem. Let's create the problem again. Here's the problem. So it's not rounding correctly. Even if I jump this up to say 3 decimal places, right? And I move this one out another decimal place, and I see the check mark, it's rounding correctly with the 0 there, or 1 there. It's rounding correctly. It's only in the case where 5 thousandths. It's the only one. There's the two numbers, 0.005 and 1.0. Those two numbers I cannot get to round correctly. It rounds the 5 down instead of rounding it up like it does in any other case. So if anybody finds why it's doing that, just send me a text so I don't go crazy. Like I say, I'm not going to spend too much. It looks like a bug to me, but I'm not going to spend too much time on hunting down the cause of that. It looks to be a bug, so we'll have to contact VPC and find out what's going on. All right, let's deal with negative numbers now. I'm going to change this to a negative, just to show what's going on, and hit the check mark. And I'm going to go 3 places here so we can see things. Let's do that again. So I got a negative 2.005. It seems to be working almost correctly. The real string is obviously wrong, and this is obviously wrong. So it's kind of working. It's kind of working. So what we're going to need to do is find out why it's doing what it's doing. It's going, like right here it says real, if real is less than 1. Well, any negative number is less than 1. I'm really looking for fractions to go through this routine. So setting it to less than 1, well, any negative number is going to go into this routine, whether it's a whole number or a fraction. So I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my test here. I'm just saying now if real is less than 1, do this. Now I'm going to say, I just want to know if it's the absolute value, and the function ABS is absolute value, put in parentheses real, and now it will compare the absolute value of real. In other words, I'm just looking for a fraction. If the fraction is if this number is less than 1, it means it's a fraction, and I want to do this routine. So it will only do this if this is a fraction. So if I hit the check mark, I'm now at negative 2.005, which is where I want to be. The real string, that's what I got. The real number matches the real string. It looks pretty good. So let's find out what happens when we go to 0. And let's just do a fraction, because right now it's going through this routine here. So if I put a 0 here, it'll do this. It's going to be a fraction, and it's going to do this routine. So let's see what happens when I put a 0 there. I put a 0 there, put the check mark, and now my numbers are incorrect. It's subtracted. It said if it's a fraction, come here, but right here I'm just adding 1. If it's a negative number, I should be subtracting 1. So I really need to put a conditional statement here, whether I should add or subtract 1. So I'll do that. I'll just press enter, and I'll put an if statement, if condition here. If real is less than 0, I want to do one thing, else I'll do something else. Like that. Let me copy all this stuff. Control C, Control V. Now if it's less than 0, I don't want to be adding 1. I want to be subtracting 1. So all I really need to do is go negative there. And now if it's less than 0, it's a negative number, it's going to subtract 1. Because when I'm going through this routine, I don't care what it's doing. Okay, so I got, if real is less than that, I'm going to subtract 1. However, I lost my sign. So now I have to set up another condition for this string. do the same thing. There's a few ways to do this. There's probably a simpler way of doing this, but I'm not going to spend any time with that. So basically, I'm just going to do the same thing again. If it's a negative number, do one thing. If it's not a negative number, do something else. I could actually put in here a conditional statement, create a new parameter to represent what this is. Let's try that. That might be a cleaner way to do that. So let's create a new parameter. So the front of the string, I'll just cut front string fs. I'll set it creating a new parameter. It's going to be a string, and I'm going to put in quotes because it's a string. So it's going to be, if it's less than 0, it's going to be a negative 0 point. Okay. And then down here, I'm just going to copy this and put it here. Oops. So if it's positive, I don't need the negative in this thing. So it's just 0 point. And then down here, instead of using what's in quotes, I'm just going to replace what's in quotes here with fs. fs. Okay? That seems to be a cleaner way to do it. So I'm just putting that negative, it's negative 0 point there. So if I check mark, I now get my negative. So the number is negative 0.005, and that's what my string is, and that's what it should be. And if I change this to 2 places, we'll see the same error. I just noticed that we see the same error, the rounding error. So 1 gives us a rounding error, even a negative. So actually there's 4. Let's just try 1 and hit the check mark. And yeah, it's not rounding correctly there. But if I put 2, it'll round correctly. So it's rounding. It's got the 0, 1 now. So it looks like a Creo bug. So there are actually 4 numbers that don't work in this routine. And there's probably a way to, there's a way to get around it. You just have to look for those 4 numbers. If it happens, even those 4 numbers, you got to do something different. But I really think that Creo needs to fix that kind of thing. So this routine doesn't work with those 4 numbers. It doesn't round correctly. It works, it just doesn't round it correctly. So keep that in mind when using this until Creo fixes this little bug. This is what we're going to have to do. Just look for it. If it's really important that that's rounded correctly, I suggest just using 3 decimal places instead of the 2. But because it's the only one that doesn't work. It works with, those are the only 4 numbers that doesn't work with. So I would advise just to go to 3 places on it. If you need accuracy, just go to the 3 places. If you need that to be rounded correctly, do 3 places. Okay, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to my channel. I'll have some more coming out pretty soon.